Alright, let's talk about something a lot of Genshin players have been waiting for, and it's finally starting to happen, at least partially. Varka, the mysterious Grand Master of the Knights of Favonius, is finally going to make an appearance in version 5.6. Well, sort of. And at the same time, we've got a new sketch of SKIRK'S splash art that might not look like much at first glance, but it actually says a lot about her character and potential abilities. Both of these things are exciting on their own, but when you look at them together, they paint a bigger picture about where the story might be heading next, especially as we slowly transition from Natlan into Nod Krai, and maybe even the Abyss. Save up to 23% on the current banners at lootbar.gg. All you need is your UID and server. The link is in the description. Before we get into the actual details, there's something we really need to talk about, because the timing of these leaks, it's kind of suspicious. As you probably know, yesterday was April 1st. And yeah, April Fool's Day, which in the Genshin leak community basically means chaos. Every year, leakers, artists, and even some data miners use that as a chance to troll everyone with fake splash arts, fake banners, fake announcements, you name it. And this year was no exception. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The SKIRK'S splash art sketch? That one actually dropped on March 31st. But if you look at the time zones, it was already April 1st in China when it came out. So technically it still falls under the April Fool's umbrella, but that might actually be the point. It could be a clever way to throw people off, like, oh, don't worry, it's just an April Fool's joke, while actually slipping out a real leak. It wouldn't be the first time something like that happened either. As for the Varka info, that one was shared with a note saying it's not a joke and that it's meant to be taken seriously. But even then, I mean, let's be honest, we've been burned before. It's still good to stay a little skeptical, especially when this kind of stuff drops during the most troll-heavy time of the year. So yeah, just a quick heads up before we dive in. This could all turn out to be legit, or it could be a smart April Fool's setup meant to mess with our expectations. Either way, it's super fun to break down and speculate on, so let's get into what we did see and what it could mean for the future of the story. Let's start with Varka, since this is kind of a big deal. If you're newer to the game or just haven't been paying close attention to Mondstadt's lore, Varka has been this sort of mythical figure for a while now. Everyone keeps mentioning him, Jean, Eula, Mika, but we've never seen him. No in-game model, no voice, not even a silhouette. Just secondhand stories about how powerful and charismatic he is. He's the current Grand Master of the Knights of Favonius, which technically makes him the top figure in Mondstadt, but he's been off leading an expedition in Snezhnaya ever since before the game started. Now, according to the latest leaks, Varka will finally be heard, voiced, for the first time in the 5.6 Archon quest. That's right, still no in-game model, so don't expect him to suddenly pop up in a cutscene. It won't be a face-to-face meeting, but this is still the most direct interaction we've ever had with him in the game. And honestly, even just hearing him is already a huge step forward, because from the voice alone, we can start figuring things out. Whether he sounds older and experienced or younger and more energetic, is he calm and commanding or intense and emotional? These things say a lot about a character's personality and role in the story. So even without showing his face, the voice could be our first real clue into who Varka actually is. And considering how long Hoyoverse has been building him up, this doesn't feel random. It really feels like they're setting the stage for something bigger. He might still be away in Nod Krai, but bringing his voice into the story now strongly suggests that a full reveal might be just around the corner. Now shifting over to SKIRK, yeah, the same woman who trained Child in the Abyss. We've barely seen her, but her name alone has had the community buzzing for a while, and now we finally have a first look at her splash art, or at least a sketch of it. And even though it's rough, it already gives us a lot to work with. While her body is clearly facing away, standing tall, centered, and composed, her head is turned back toward the viewer. That slight turn where she's looking over her shoulder gives off a completely different vibe than if she were just facing forward or fully turned away. It adds this layer of awareness. like she knows someone is watching, but she's not alarmed or surprised. It's deliberate, calm, almost like she's assessing you, silently acknowledging your presence while still maintaining her distance. Combined with her relaxed grip on the sword and the strange shards floating around her, the whole image really frames her as someone who exists between worlds, someone who's not entirely of Teyvat, but not fully removed from it either. But what really pulls you in is the background. Around her, there are these floating shards, fragmented pieces that look like broken mirrors or maybe shattered dimensions. It's surreal, almost like reality is splitting apart behind her. And then there's the circle behind her, a large orb that looks incredibly similar to the void orb she held in the Archon quest. Back then, it glowed purple and emitted floating particles, hinting at some kind of void or abyssal power. And if that's the case, the parallels with characters like Dainsleif become even more interesting. He's also connected to the Abyss, but from a different angle, more of a cursed guardian type. SKIRK might be his opposite in a way, same connection to the Abyss, but different purpose. Could we see them cross paths in the future? Could SKIRK'S connection to Chilled in the Abyss deepen the lore even further? There's so much potential here, and it's the kind of stuff that makes you want to speculate for hours. The SKIRK splash art might turn out to be fake, and yeah, it was probably just part of the April Fool's chaos, but there's something about the whole piece that really stuck with me. You know that feeling when an artist casually puts down a few scribbles, nothing polished, just rough lines, but somehow it still looks really good? Like, it captures a vibe or emotion even without being fully finished. That's exactly the kind of feeling I got from this sketch. It's rough, sure, but not in a careless way. The proportions feel solid, the composition is balanced, and there's intention behind how everything is laid out. From her stance to the way the void orb sits behind her. Even though it looks like someone just sketched over a structure, the entire piece still comes together in a way that feels thoughtful, almost cinematic. It's not just a doodle. It feels like a glimpse into something bigger, like a concept that's not quite finalized but already has a strong identity. Putting it all together, this update feels like more than just the usual Archon quest chapter. It's slowly tying together multiple threads we've been following for years. Varka's voice showing up finally grounds him in the present story, and SKIRK'S splash art sketch adds more fuel to the mystery surrounding the Abyss and what lies beyond. It's not just about who these characters are individually, it's about what they represent in the bigger narrative. Power beyond Teyvat. What do you think? Do you believe Varka is going to play a major role once we reach Nod Krai? Does SKIRK feel like a friend or foe to you, based on her design? I'd love to hear your theories, so drop a comment and let's talk about it. Because honestly, the story might be shifting into its most exciting phase yet.